You've definitely heard the name Warren Buffett. But what if I told you that the real secret to his success was a partner who, on purpose, stayed completely in the shadows? Today, we're going to dive into the incredible mind of Charlie Munger, the true architect behind Berkshire Hathaway, and unpack the mental toolkit that made him an absolute master of clear thinking. I mean, let's just start with the highest praise possible, right? This is from Warren Buffett himself. He called Charlie Munger a perfect partner. Now, just let that sink in for a second. For over 40 years, building one of the most valuable companies on the planet, these two never had a single argument. That fact alone tells you we're not just talking about some brilliant investor, we're talking about someone who is truly extraordinary.
So that really brings us to the big question of this whole explainer. Everybody knows Buffett, but who was this guy? This indispensable partner who actively chose to stay out of the spotlight? Well, let's find out.
To really get their dynamic, you have to understand what Munger's role was. He was Buffett's ultimate intellectual weapon. His job, really, was to challenge every single idea that came across their desks. So while Buffett was the celebrated public face, the Oracle of Omaha, Munger played a totally different, but just as critical role. He was the devil's advocate, the intellectual sparring partner. In fact, Buffett gave him this amazing nickname, the abominable no-man, because his whole job was to find the one fatal flaw in any plan, to kill the bad ideas before they could cause any real damage. And the results of this partnership? Well, they're absolutely staggering. Since these two took over, Berkshire Hathaway's market value has gone up 13,500 times. That's the kind of insane growth that can only happen when you have a legendary partnership built on just brutal intellectual honesty. So how did Munger's mind actually work? This is where we get to the core of his genius. See, he didn't just have ideas. He built this unique mental operating system that let him see the world with a kind of clarity that most of us can only dream of. Munger loved to use this quote because it points out a huge flaw in how most people think. Most of us, we get trained in one field, maybe economics or law or engineering, and then we try to solve every single problem using that one tool. Munger believed this was basically a recipe for disaster. His solution to this hammer and nail problem was the concept of mental models. And the idea is actually pretty simple, but it is profound. You need to go out and collect the biggest, most fundamental ideas from all the major fields of study, and then keep them in your head like a toolkit for thinking. And he really practiced what he preached. He didn't just study finance. No way. He was pulling these huge concepts from everywhere. From engineering, he took the idea of redundancy and backup systems. From biology, the incredible power of evolution. From psychology, all the ways our own brains trick us. He knew that reality isn't divided up into neat little academic subjects, so your thinking shouldn't be either. But here's the real magic. He didn't just collect these models like stamps. He wove them together into what he called a latticework. This is the key. It allowed him to see how an idea from physics, like a tipping point, could totally explain a sudden crash in the market, or how a simple psychological bias could cause a company's stock to be completely mispriced. It gave him this multidimensional view of any problem he looked at. Okay, so with this powerful mental operating system running in the background, Munger developed a set of really unconventional, almost counterintuitive rules for making better decisions in life and business. This one right here might be his most famous and most powerful tool. It's a simple instruction that he borrowed from a great mathematician, and he applied it to everything. Instead of just thinking forward about a problem, he would turn it completely upside down. Just look at how different this is. Most of us are busy asking, how do I become successful? Munger would invert it and ask, okay, what causes people to fail? Great, I'm just going to avoid doing all of that. He was convinced that it's way easier to avoid being stupid than it is to try to be brilliant. And man, that is a seriously powerful way to clear up your thinking. His second big rule is all about intellectual humility. Munger was absolutely ruthless about understanding the boundaries of his own knowledge, and he made sure he never, ever stepped outside of them. He loved to tell this story about the famous physicist Max Planck's chauffeur. See, the chauffeur had heard his boss's physics lecture so many times that he had it memorized, word for word. But one day, after delivering the lecture for Planck, someone in the audience asked a simple follow-up question, and the chauffeur could only say, "That question is so simple, I'm surprised you have to ask it. I'll let my chauffeur answer it." You see, he knew the words, but he had zero real understanding. So, the crucial question he's really asking all of us is this. In what you do every day, are you the physicist with deep, real knowledge? Or are you just the chauffeur, reciting things you've heard? Knowing the difference is absolutely critical if you want to avoid making huge mistakes. And all of this leads to this fascinating paradox at the very heart of his philosophy. It's this wild combination of, on the one hand, extreme patience, what he hilariously called sit on your ass investing, just doing nothing for long, long periods. And then, on the other hand, when that rare, perfect opportunity shows up right in the middle of your circle of competence, you act with massive, overwhelming force. But listen, none of these intellectual tools, none of these clever tricks would have worked without Munger's true foundation. The one thing that held it all together was his absolute, unwavering commitment to honesty and integrity. Munger's son told this great story about his dad. They were on a family vacation, and Munger took a 10-minute detour just to top off the gas tank of a car they had borrowed, even though it was already half full. His son was confused and asked why, and Munger just said, "When you borrow a man's car, you always return it with a full tank of gas." And that one small act, it really tells you everything. It's about so much more than just gas, right? It's about fairness, it's about consideration, and it's about being absolutely reliable. Munger truly believed that just being a trustworthy person was the ultimate competitive advantage, in business and in life. He loved this saying too. It really sums up his whole approach. You see, for him, simplicity and honesty, they weren't just nice moral virtues. They were practical tools. Being truthful is just plain more efficient. So when you put this all together, what's Charlie Munger's ultimate legacy? Because it's about way, way more than just making a lot of money. He deeply admired this line about the ancient Greek statesman, Solon. For Munger, the ultimate goal in life was simple. Go to bed a little wiser than you were when you woke up. He was just relentless about learning, not just for fun, but to build a more and more accurate map of how the world really works so he could navigate it better. And so we're going to end with a challenge, one that comes straight from the Munger playbook. But notice the inversion, right? It's not about how do I achieve greatness. It's about how do I avoid total disaster. Just by asking and answering that one question every day, you are already starting to think like Charlie Munger. And that right there is a pretty powerful legacy to leave behind.